The badge was still warm in her hand when security walked her out. "My loves, come closer. I need to tell you about a black woman named Serena Prescott, 31 years old, single mother, executive senior secretary at a logistics holding on the top floor of a glass tower. She was the only woman in that building who looked her boss in the eye, and her boss, his name was Kang Min-jae. In the streets, they called him Snow Wolf. He wore a Korean tattoo of a snow wolf climbing the right side of his neck, up to behind his ear, Italian-cut graphite suit, silver watch, a stare cold enough to freeze a room. They had a secret, a glance across a meeting, a tie straightened in an empty office, a kiss behind a closed door. Aigu. Then came Tuesday, 8:05 in the morning. Serena walked in with reports under her arm and a photo of her little boy Elijah on her phone. By 2 in the afternoon, Snow Wolf was staring at surveillance photos. His right hand, iron hand, had just slid across the desk. His fist closed until his wedding ring cut his palm. Half an hour later, he fired her in front of the entire office, said she was replaceable, told security to walk her to the door. Serena spent every last dollar she had on an old bakery, 3 days of renovation, and every single night, a black sedan sat parked across the street. Watching, she had no idea who was inside, but what she found in that bakery on the third morning. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Serena crossed the lobby at 8:05, the way she crossed it every Tuesday, heels finding the polished stone the way a metronome finds the beat. The security guard nodded. She nodded back. The elevator opened before she pressed the button, because the man at the desk had learned, over 3 years, that Serena Prescott did not like to wait. 29 floors up, the open space of the holding was already awake. Screens glowed, coffee machines hissed, men in gray suits pretended not to watch her walk. She wore the ivory blouse and the graphite pencil skirt, and the thin gold chain her mother had given her the week Elijah was born. On her chest, the plastic badge with her name in small block letters. Under her arm, the quarterly reports Kang Min-jae had asked for on Friday and had not yet said thank you for. She stopped at her desk, set the reports down, turned the framed photo of Elijah half a degree to the left, so the light from the window did not wash out his face. 5 years old, cheeks like small warm loaves, holding a paper crown he had made himself. She looked at him for exactly 1 second, then she opened her calendar. At 8:11, Margaret Hollis came around the partition holding 2 cups. Margaret was 42, twist out to the shoulders, senior analyst on the 3rd row, and the only person in the building who called Serena by her first name in the hallway. "He asked for you at 8, Margaret said. "He always asks for me at 8. He asked twice. Serena took the cup. She did not sip it. She lifted the reports again, tucked them tight against her ribs, and walked the long aisle to the corner office. The men in gray suits pretended not to watch her walk. The men in gray suits always pretended. The door was closed. She did not knock. She had stopped knocking 8 months ago, the night he told her, quietly, over a plate of cold noodles at midnight, that a woman who knocked at his door was a woman he could send away, and he did not want to be able to send her away. She opened it. Kang Min-jae was standing at the window, graphite Italian suit, white shirt open at the first button, no tie, silver watch on the wrist that held the phone. He did not turn. He did not need to turn. He had heard her heels in the corridor before she reached the door. Serena. Reports. She set them on the glass table. He turned then. 35 years old, a face built from straight lines, black hair cut short at the sides, longer on top, and eyes that most of the men on this floor could not hold for more than 2 seconds. He held hers. He always held hers. "Sit. I have the 8:30. Cancel it. She did not sit. She adjusted the report so its edge was parallel to the edge of the table. His mouth did something that was not quite a smile. You canceled dinner Saturday. I had Elijah. You had Elijah last Saturday too. I have Elijah every Saturday, Minjae. He crossed the room. He did not touch her. He came close enough that she could smell the cologne he wore only in this building, the darker one, the one she had picked out for him at a counter on Fifth Avenue in October, when she still let herself pretend that picking out a man's cologne was not a small, dangerous thing. He reached past her, straightened the silver clip on his own tie that was not there today because he was not wearing a tie, and the gesture was so absurd, so obvious a pretext to lean into her space, that she almost smiled. She did not smile. The Beck account, she said. You wanted a summary by 9. I wanted you here at 8. Then you should have hired someone who does not have a son. The silence in the room went the small, tight way it went when she said the word son. He stepped back half a step. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he has decided, quietly, to keep alive. 9 o'clock, he said. 9 o'clock. She left. She did not look back. In the corridor, she let out one long breath through her nose, the way her mother had taught her to breathe when she was 10, and a white woman at the supermarket had asked her to move. At 9, in the glass conference room, he asked her for the bake numbers in front of 11 men. She gave them without looking down at her notes. One of the men, older, silver-templed, tried to correct her on a figure. She let him finish. Then she quoted the source document by page and paragraph. The older man closed his mouth. Minjae did not smile. He never smiled in meetings, but his eyes rested on her 1/2 second longer than they rested on anyone else, and every man at that table felt it, and every man at that table pretended he did not. At 10:15, she was back at her desk. She opened the photo of Elijah on her phone. He had drawn her a picture the night before, a woman with a wide skirt and a paper crown, and small brown suns for hands. She had taped it to the fridge next to the school schedule. She looked at the photo for exactly 1 second. Then she opened her email. She had built this, every inch of it. She had come to this city at 23, with 2 suitcases, and a scholarship that had not covered the second semester. She had worked reception at a hotel in Midtown for 11 months, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who did not, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who did not, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had worked as an executive assistant for a woman who screamed, and then she had been pregnant 3 months later. She had told no one at the office. She had worn looser blouses and taken the stairs, and when Elijah was born, she had come back in 9 days, because 9 days was what she could afford. She had raised him alone. She had raised him well. She did not need a man in the doorway. She had told Minjae that on the second night, he had listened. He had not argued. That was the thing about him that had undone her in the end. He listened. He did not argue. He simply arranged the world, quietly, so that the thing she had said became the thing that happened. At 11, she took a call from Elijah's school. He had bitten a boy. The boy had called him a name. She listened to the vice principal for 4 minutes. She said, "I understand. I will speak with him tonight. Thank you." She hung up. She sat with her hands flat on the desk for 10 seconds. Then she made a note in her calendar for 6:30 and opened the next email. At noon, Margaret came by with a paper bag. "You didn't eat." "I ate." "You didn't." Margaret set the bag down. Inside, a sandwich, an apple, a folded napkin. Serena looked at the bag, and then at Margaret, and then at the bag again. "Thank you." "Eat." "I will. I mean now." She ate. At 12:40, she went to the small conference room on the north side to review the year-end deck. The blinds were down, the lights were off. She turned them on. She was 3 slides in when the door opened behind her, and she did not need to turn around. He closed the door. He did not lock it. He stood behind her at the podium and read the slides over her shoulder for 1 long minute in silence. "Slide 4 is wrong," he said. "Slide 4 is what you asked for." "Then what I asked for was wrong." She turned. He was very close. The dark cologne, the silver watch, the first button open. His hand came up and touched the gold chain at her throat, just the pad of 1 finger against the little clasp at the back, straightening it. "Not here," she said. "Nowhere else." "Not here." He let the chain go. He stepped back. He did not apologize. He did not have to apologize. In the doorway he paused, half-turned, and said, in Korean, quietly, only for her, "You are the only person in this building who tells me no." She said nothing. He left. She stood at the podium in the empty room with her hand at her throat. She closed her eyes. She opened them. She fixed slide 4. At 1:15 she was back at her desk. At 1:40 she was on the phone with a supplier. At 1:52 she felt, without knowing why, that the temperature of the floor had changed. She did not look up. She kept typing, but the sound around her had gone thinner, the way sound goes thinner in a room where 2 or 3 people have stopped breathing at the same time. She heard Park Do-yoon's voice at the far end of the corridor, low, in Korean, and she heard the click of the corner office door, and then she heard nothing at all for 90 seconds, which was longer than anyone on this floor ever went without speaking. Behind the corner office door, Min Jae was standing at his desk. Do-yoon had set down a slim black folder. Inside the folder were 7 photographs, printed on matte paper, taken from a distance with a long lens. The first photograph showed Serena at the school gate at 3:15 the day before, Elijah's small hand in hers. The second photograph showed the same gate from a different angle, and in the corner of the frame, out of focus but unmistakable, a black sedan with tinted windows, the same sedan Do-yoon had flagged in a report from Busan 4 months earlier. The third photograph showed a man in the driver's seat of that sedan, gloved hands on the wheel, cigarette burning between 2 fingers. The fourth showed the man's face in profile. Do-yoon had circled it in red pen. Min Jae looked at the fourth photograph for 11 seconds without moving. Then he looked at the 5th, and the 6th, and the 7th. Each one a different day, a different street, a different angle, and always, in the corner, the same sedan. He closed the folder. He put his hand flat on the desk. He did not speak. Do-yoon waited. Do-yoon had waited beside this man for 9 years. He knew the shape of this silence. "How long?" Min Jae said. 11 days. "Who ordered it?" "We don't know yet. The plates are clean." The face in the fourth photograph is a soldier out of the Incheon cell. He does not move without orders. Min Jae closed his hand into a fist on the desk. The gold band on his ring finger, the one she did not know he wore because he took it off before he came near her, pressed hard into his palm. He pressed harder. He felt the edge of the metal open the skin. He watched a small, dark bead of blood come up on his own hand, and he did not move. "They saw her with me," he said. "They saw her with you. They saw the boy." They saw the boy. He looked at the window. 29 floors below, the city moved without knowing anything. He thought, Very quickly and very clearly, the way he had trained himself to think in the small rooms where thinking slowly got a man killed. He thought about the photograph of Elijah on her desk. He thought about the way she had said the word son that morning. He thought about the second night, when she had told him she did not need a man in a doorway, and he thought about how gently and completely he had gone about becoming exactly that. They saw the boy. He opened his hand. He looked at the small red line the ring had cut into his palm. He wiped it once against the underside of the desk. Do-yoon. Yes. Bring her in. To speak with, no. Do-yoon waited. Bring HR, Min-jae said. Bring legal. Bring 2 men from security. In the glass room, 20 minutes. Do-yoon did not move for a full second. He was not a man who questioned. He questioned now, once, with his eyes only. Min-jae did not look at him. Min-jae was looking at the window. She has to be nothing to me, he said, in Korean, so quietly it was almost not a sentence. By the end of the afternoon, in front of every man on this floor, she has to be nothing to me, or they will use her, and they will use the boy, and I will spend the rest of my life digging small graves. Do-yoon nodded once. He took the folder. He left. At 2:20, Serena was on a call with a vendor in Seoul when Margaret appeared at her partition, and Margaret's face was wrong. Margaret's face had never been wrong before. They want you in the glass room. Now? Now? I'm on a call. They said now. Serena hung up mid-sentence. She stood. She smoothed the ivory blouse. She picked up the paper notebook she carried into every meeting, and she walked the long aisle to the glass room, and she felt, without knowing why, the way she had felt at 10 years old in the supermarket, when the white woman had asked her to move. The glass room was full. 2 men from security stood on either side of the door. A woman from HR she had spoken to twice was seated at the table with a folder open in front of her. A lawyer she had never seen was seated beside the HR woman. Park Do-yoon stood behind Min-jae's chair, hands folded in front of him, cheek to the door. Min-jae was seated at the head of the table. He did not stand when she came in. He did not look at her. He looked at the folder in front of him, and he said, in a voice she had never heard from him in 3 years, flat and public and Korean-inflected and cold, Ms. Prescott, thank you for coming. She did not sit. Nobody had offered her a chair. We have made a decision at the executive level regarding the restructuring of the analyst pool. Your position has been eliminated, effective at the close of business today. The room did not move. She heard her own breath. She did not blink. There will be a standard severance package. Ms. Hollis from HR will walk you through the paperwork. Security will accompany you to your desk. You will have 30 minutes to collect personal items. Company devices, badge, and access cards will be surrendered at the front. Is that clear? She did not answer. She had been trained, at 23, by a woman who screamed, to answer every question with the word yes. She did not use that training now. She used a different training. The training her mother had given her, at 10, in a supermarket aisle. She looked at him. He did not look up. Is there, she said, very evenly, a performance basis for this decision? The HR woman opened her mouth. Min-jae raised one finger. The HR woman closed her mouth. You are replaceable, Ms. Prescott, he said. Everyone in this building is replaceable. That is the nature of the business. She heard the word replaceable land, somewhere behind her sternum. She let it land. She did not let her face move. Understood, she said. He nodded once at the folder. He did not look at her. Do-yoon stepped away from the wall. One of the security men opened the glass door. She walked out first. She walked the long aisle back to her desk with 2 men in dark suits behind her, and every man in a gray suit on the floor pretended not to watch her walk, and Margaret was standing at her partition with both hands over her mouth, and Serena went past Margaret without stopping, because if she stopped, she would not start again. She picked up the framed photograph of Elijah. She picked up the small ceramic mug he had made her at daycare with the letters M and O and M painted crooked on the side. She picked up the thin gold chain she had taken off at lunch and left in her drawer. She left everything else. At the front desk, she laid the badge down. She laid the phone down. She laid the access card down. The security guard who had nodded at her every morning for 3 years did not lift his eyes from the counter. In the elevator, she stood between the 2 men in dark suits, and she did not look at either of them. On the 29th floor, 29 stories above her, Kang Min-jae was still sitting in the glass room, and his hand on the table under the folder was closed so hard, around nothing at all, that the small cut from the ring had opened again, and was bleeding, quietly, into the cuff of a white shirt that no one in that room could see. The elevator doors closed. Serena Prescott set the framed photograph of her son against her chest, put one arm around it the way she put one arm around him at night, and rode down 29 floors in a silence that did not belong to her yet. At the ground floor, the doors opened onto the polished stone of the lobby she had crossed at 8:05 that morning, like a metronome finding the beat. She stepped out. She did not look back. On the street, the November light was thin and white, and it did not warm anything, and Serena Prescott, 31 years old, mother of a boy who had bitten another boy for calling him a name, walked 3 blocks before she realized she had left her coat on the back of her chair on the 29th floor, and she did not go back. She kept walking, slower now. In her bag, against her ribs, the framed face of Elijah pressed steady over her heart, and somewhere in the city behind her, in a room she would not enter again, a man with a small cut in his palm was already picking up a phone to call the one person in the world who could find out who owned a black sedan with clean plates. Serena did not go home first. She went to the bank on Fulton, the one with the tall brass door, and the manager who had once told her that a woman like her would go far. She sat across from him and asked for the number in her account read out loud. He read it. She asked him to write it on a slip of paper. He wrote it. She folded the slip twice and put it in the same inside pocket where the framed face of Elijah rested, and she stood up before he could ask what she planned to do with the number. Outside, the wind had turned. She walked 8 blocks with her coat open and did not feel it. The city moved around her the way it always did, indifferent, businesslike, uninterested in whether a woman had a job that morning or not. She let it. She had spent 11 years being useful to men in glass buildings, and today the building had spat her out, and the city had not blinked, and there was something in that indifference she wanted to lean into. It felt honest. It felt like a rule she had finally been allowed to see. By 4 in the afternoon, she was standing on Willow Street in front of a bakery with a hand-lettered sign in the window. Closing sale. Everything must go. The paint on the door had cracked in 3 places, and the awning sagged on the left side, and the glass had a smear at knee height where a child had pressed a palm long ago, and no one had wiped it. She looked at the smear a long time. Then she pushed the door. A bell rang above her head. The smell hit her first. Old flour, old sugar, coffee that had been reheated too many times, and under all of it, the faint burnt butter warmth of a room that had been a bakery for a very long time. Behind the counter, a white man in his 70s stood with his hands flat on the wood, watching her like she was weather he was trying to read. "You looking for something specific?" he said. It was not a question. "I'm looking to buy this building." Richard Abernathy did not move for a full second. Then he pulled his boina off his head, folded it in his hand, and set it on the counter next to a jar of change. "Sit down, miss." She sat on a stool by the window. He poured her coffee she did not ask for. He poured himself one. He did not speak until he had taken the first sip and set the mug down and looked at her over the rim of his gold-framed glasses. You know what this place is worth. I know what it's listed for. Not the same number, miss. I know. He nodded once. He asked her name. She gave it. He asked what she did. She told him she used to do a lot of things, and today she did not do any of them anymore. He nodded again, slower this time, and she saw something move behind the tired blue of his eyes that she recognized from her mother's face at the kitchen table on nights when the rent was due and there was no rent. Recognition. The look of a person who had once been on the other side of a counter asking a question exactly like the one she was asking now. My wife opened this place with a black woman in 1964, he said. Pearl Whitfield. My wife baked and Pearl ran the front. They ran it 40 years, the two of them. When my wife passed, Pearl kept it going alone another 11. Then Pearl sold it to me for $1 and told me to hold it until the right person walked in. Serena did not move. You want to know how many people have walked in here in the last 3 years asking to buy it? How many? 9. How many did you sell to? None. He took another sip of the coffee. He set the mug down. You got a child. She did not ask how he knew. She lifted her phone. She turned the screen. Elijah in a mulattoum, the color of ash, a yellow shirt underneath, the gap between his front teeth showing because he was laughing at something off frame. Richard Abernathy looked at the photo for a long time. Then he reached under the counter and pulled out a manila folder that had been sitting there, she understood, for exactly this. He slid it across the wood. Pearl left instructions. If a woman came in here alone with a child and a number in her pocket and no reason to lie about either, I was to sell her the building for the number she brought and not $1 more. That folder is the deed and the keys and Pearl's phone number if you ever want to meet her. She's 78. She still answers. Serena opened the folder. The number on the top page was the number on the slip in her pocket, almost to the dollar. She looked up. Richard Abernathy was already turning to take his boina off the counter and put it back on his head. Sign the papers tomorrow morning, he said. Come at 7. Bring the boy if you want him to see. She walked out onto Willow Street with a folder against her ribs where the framed face of Elijah had been that morning, and she did not know when she had started crying. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist before she reached the corner. She did not want the city to see. The city, of course, was not looking. Across the street, 4 car lengths down, a black sedan sat at the curb with its engine off. The windows were tinted the exact shade that was legal in the state of New York, and no darker. Inside, Park Do-yoon lowered a small pair of binoculars and lifted a phone to his ear. She bought it, he said in Korean. On the other end of the line, in a corner office, 38 floors above Midtown, Kang Min-jae was standing at the window with his back to his desk. The cut in his palm had been bandaged. He had not sat down since the meeting at 2. He heard the sentence. He closed his eyes. How much did she pay? Do-yoon told him. That's less than the building is worth. The old man sold it to her under the market. There's a story there. I can find it if you want. Don't, Min-jae said. Leave the old man alone. There was a silence on the line. Do-yoon knew when to fill silence and when to let it stand. He let this one stand. Stay on the street, Min-jae said finally. All night, every night, nobody touches that block. Nobody parks within 200 feet of that door who I do not clear first. She sees you, you drive off, you come back 3 hours later in a different car. Understood. Understood. And Do-yoon? Sir. She does not know. She does not know, Do-yoon repeated, and the line went dead. Min-jae did not turn from the window for another full minute. Below him, the city was starting to light up in that way it did in the last hour of dusk when the offices emptied, and the bars filled, and the taxis lit their roof lamps. Somewhere in that grid of light was a woman walking home to a boy who would ask her how her day had gone. He had made her lie to that boy tonight. He would make her lie to that boy every night for as long as it took to keep them both alive. He accepted the arithmetic of it. He had accepted worse. What he had not accepted, and what he did not yet know how to accept, was the small, stubborn fact that the woman had not gone home to grieve. She had gone to a bank and then to a bakery, and she had bought a building with the last of what she had, and there was a language in that behavior he did not have a word for in Korean or in English. He pressed his forehead to the glass and watched the city. Serena reached the apartment at 6:40. Elijah opened the door before her key was in the lock. He had done that since he was 3. He would stand behind the door listening for her step in the hall, and he would swing the door open at the exact second she reached for the handle, and every time she pretended to be surprised, and every time he laughed like it was the first time. "Mama, baby, why you home early?" She knelt. She untied his sneaker that had come undone in his running. She retied it. She kissed the top of his Saradinho curls and breathed him in. "I have a surprise for you." "What surprise?" "Tomorrow morning we are going to a place on Willow Street, and I am going to sign some papers, and when I finish signing, that place will be ours." He tilted his head. "What is it?" "A bakery, love." He thought about this for a long time. His small brown eyes, the ones that had all her mother in them, and none of the man who had not stayed, held on hers. "Can we make bread?" "Yes. Every day. Every day." He nodded, solemn as a judge, and then he said, "Mama, I need to change my clothes for signing the papers." He walked into his room and closed the door behind him with the exaggerated care of a child who had decided to be a professional. She stayed kneeling in the hall a long time after the door closed. She did not cry again. She was done crying for one day. She got up and went into the kitchen and started dinner and did not check her phone once, because she knew there would be nothing from the building on Park Avenue and nothing from the man in the corner office on the 38th floor, and she did not want to see the nothing spelled out on a screen. The next morning, she and Elijah signed the papers at 7. Richard Abernathy poured them both coffee and Elijah orange juice from a carton that had been in the fridge behind the counter for what looked like a decade, and Serena watched her son sip juice from a chipped bakery mug and swing his sneakers under a stool that was 3 inches too tall for him, and she thought, "This is the first thing I have owned that a man cannot fire me from." By 9, the keys were in her hand. By 10, she was standing in the middle of the empty bakery, with her hair up in a coque cacheado alto and mechas frontes falling loose over her forehead, a white regatta under a crew avental amarrado tight at her waist, jeans escuro, plain white tennis, and a paint roller in her hand. Elijah sat cross-legged on the flour-dusted floor with a coloring book, drawing what looked like the front of a building with 2 stick figures holding hands in front of it. She started with the walls. The color she had picked was a deep, warm Bordeaux, the color of dried roses, the color of the awning Pearl Whitfield had put up in 1964 and taken down in 2005. The roller moved over the old paint slowly. She had never done this before. Her hands learned as they went. By the 3rd wall, her wrists ached, and her lower back sang, and she stopped and drank water and looked at what she had done and smiled at it. And Elijah looked up from his coloring book and said, "Mama, your hands are red like berry," and she looked down at her palms and saw the Bordeaux on her skin and laughed for the first time since Tuesday. She worked until midnight. She and Elijah slept on a blanket on the floor of the back office because there was no point going home. In the morning she woke at 5 and started again. She sanded the counter Pearl Whitfield had run for 41 years. She oiled it. She washed the front window inside and out. She scraped the child's palm print off the glass with a plastic razor, and then, at the last second, she stopped and left the smudge where it was. It seemed important to leave. She could not have said why. Across the street, 4 car lengths down, a black sedan sat all night with its lights off and its engine off, and every 3 hours a different sedan replaced it, and none of them stayed longer than they should have, and none of them turned on their headlights within a block of the bakery door. She did not see them. On the second night, at a little past 2 in the morning, she was on a stepladder replacing the wick of a chandelier Pearl had installed in 1971, and Elijah was asleep on the blanket behind the counter, and the whole bakery smelled of fresh paint and lemon oil and the faint sugar ghost of 41 years of bread, and she thought about her mother. Her mother had cleaned houses in Bay Ridge for 22 years. Her mother had died at 56 of a heart that had been asked to carry too much for too long. Her mother had never owned a wall. Serena climbed down from the ladder and pressed her palm, still stained Bordeaux at the fingertips, flat against the freshly painted wall, and she said out loud in the empty bakery, "Mama, I got one." She was not aware, and could not have been, that 38 floors above Midtown, a man in a dark office was watching her palm print bloom in real time on the small monitor mounted under his desk, and that the man had a bandaged cut on his own palm from 3 days before, and that when her hand met the wall his own hand had lifted, without permission from his mind, to press flat against the cold glass of his window at exactly the same second. On the third day she started on the back office. She pulled dust sheets off a stack of old wooden crates. She opened the first crate. It was full of hand-labeled coffee tins. She opened the second. It was full of Pearl Whitfield's ledgers, 41 years of them, in the round, patient handwriting of a woman who had believed that a business was a promise kept in ink. She opened the third crate, and inside, wrapped in a piece of yellowed muslin, was a framed photograph. She lifted it out. She sat down on the floor slowly, because her knees had gone. In the photograph, a black woman of about 60 stood behind the counter she had just spent 2 days oiling. The woman wore an Avental Crew Amarado, exactly the way Serena had learned to tie hers over the last 3 days. The woman's hair was up in a scarf. The woman was looking straight into the camera with an expression Serena knew, because it was her own expression in the bank manager's office and in the elevator of the holding on Tuesday morning, and in the mirror every day of her life since she had been old enough to have a face. It was the expression of a woman who had already decided. Taped to the back of the frame was a folded piece of paper. She peeled the tape carefully. She unfolded it. Pearl Whitfield's handwriting, not the ledger handwriting, something rougher, something older, something written after midnight. To whoever is holding this frame. Powerful men tried to take this bakery from me 3 times. First one was a landlord. Second one was a bank. Third one was a man who said he loved me. None of them got it. This building is standing because I did not sell it, not because they let me keep it. If you are reading this, that means Richard let you buy it, which means you brought something with you when you walked in his door. Bring it in here every morning. Don't set it down. Pearl. Serena sat on the floor of the back office, with the frame in her lap and the note in her hand, and she did not move for a long time. Behind her, Elijah slept on the blanket. Under her, the wood floor was cold. Around her, the walls she had painted Bordeaux dried in the dark. In her chest, the arithmetic of what her life had been for 11 years finished collapsing, and a different arithmetic began to write itself in its place. 38 floors above Midtown, Park Do-yoon knocked once on the door of the corner office and did not wait for an answer. Min-jae had not gone home in 72 hours. Do-yoon set a file on the desk. Min-jae looked at the file without touching it. What is it? The building. The one she bought. What about it? The debt on it is due in 11 days. Old man Abernathy sold her the walls. He didn't sell her the note. The note is with a private lender who's about to get bought out by our people because he owes us from a shipment last spring. In 11 days, that note lands on our desk. She won't be able to pay it. She'll lose the building. Min-jae did not look up. His right hand, the one with the bandaged cut, was very still on the arm of the chair. Do-yoon had known this man for 9 years and had learned to read stillness the way other men read shouting. This stillness was a different animal. "Buy it," Min-jae said. "Sir, buy the note, tonight, under another name, not one of ours, a shell we've never used, something clean, something she cannot trace to me if she spends the rest of her life trying." "Understood." And Do-yoon, "Sir." Min-jae finally looked up. His eyes were red at the edges from 3 nights without sleep and the color of iron underneath. "She does not know, ever." "She does not know," Do-yoon repeated. He picked up the file and left the office and closed the door behind him with the same care Elijah had used closing his bedroom door 2 nights before. In the empty office, Min-jae sat very still for a long time. Then he leaned forward, and he pulled open the top drawer of the desk, and he lifted out a small square of black velvet, and he unfolded it on the wood in front of him. Inside was a single item, a wooden badge, small enough to fit in a palm, with a name burned into it in careful letters. Serena. He had ordered it the morning after he fired her. He had ordered it the morning after he fired her. He had ordered it the morning after he fired her. He had ordered it the morning after he fired her. He had ordered it the morning after he fired her. He had not decided yet how it would reach her hands. He knew only that when it did, she could not know it had come from him. He wrapped it back in the velvet. He put it in the drawer. He closed the drawer. He turned off the desk lamp. In the dark, 38 floors above the city, he sat with his palms flat on the wood, and on the small monitor under the desk, a woman in a Bordeaux-stained avental knelt on a bakery floor with an old photograph in her lap and did not move, and neither did he, and outside the window the city kept lighting up as if none of this was happening. And somewhere on Willow Street, a boy of 5 slept curled against his mother's blanket and did not know yet that the man who had made his mother cry was, at that exact minute, buying the ground under their feet in a name she would never learn to spell. The alarm went off at 4 in the morning, and Serena was already awake. She had been awake since 3, staring at the ceiling of the small apartment above the bakery, listening to Elijah breathe in the bed beside hers. She had moved them in 2 nights before. The lease on the old place had ended, and the money for a new one did not exist, and the apartment upstairs was empty, and the stairs from the shop floor to the second landing were narrow and dark, but they were hers. That counted for something. She told herself that counted for a great deal. She got up without turning on the light. She dressed in the bathroom. The Bordeaux dress hung on the back of the door where she had put it the night before, and she touched the fabric with 2 fingers before she took it down. The dress was midi, fitted at the bust and waist, the skirt full to the knee. She had bought it 8 months ago for a company event she did not attend. She had promised herself she would wear it the day she opened her own door with her own key. That day was today. She put it on slowly, like she was afraid the seams would come apart in her hands. In the mirror, she pinned back the front of her curls and let the rest fall. Small gold earrings, a thin chain. She looked at herself for a long moment and did not smile. She did not need to smile yet. Elijah woke at 5. He came into the kitchen barefoot, dragging his blanket, and stopped when he saw her. "Mama," he said. His voice was still full of sleep. He rubbed one eye with a fist. "Mama, you look pretty." "Thank you, baby. You look like a lady in a picture." She knelt down and pulled him against her chest. He smelled like sleep, and the small bottle of No Tears shampoo she had used on him the night before. She held him for the length of one long breath. "Today's the day, Eli. The bakery day." The bakery day. She fed him toast and a cup of warm milk. He sat at the little table by the window and swung his legs and told her a story about a dog he had dreamed about, a dog with 3 ears and 1 wing, and she listened as if the dog were the only thing that mattered in the world. Then she washed his face with a warm cloth and put him in the navy shirt with the star and the clean jeans and the small white sneakers, and she took his hand and they went down the narrow stairs together. The bakery was dark. She stood in the doorway with her hand on the switch and did not turn it on yet. In the dim gray light from the front window, she could see the shape of the counter she had painted, the shape of the ovens she had scrubbed, the shape of the framed photograph on the wall behind the register where Pearl Whitfield stood, in an avental like her own. She let her eyes adjust. She let her chest adjust. Then she flipped the switch, and the shop came alive. Elijah ran to the display case and pressed his nose against the glass, even though the glass was still empty. He made a fog on it with his breath and drew a heart with his finger. She did not tell him to stop. She let him draw. She tied her avental around her waist and pulled the strings tight, and the small wooden name tag with the letters SERENA knocked once against her collarbone as it settled, and something in her steadied. She started the ovens. She measured flour into the big steel bowl. She cracked eggs, one after another, into a smaller bowl, and she counted them out loud, because Elijah liked to count with her. 1, 2, 3, 4. He clapped at 4. She kneaded the dough on the marble slab, and her forearms took the rhythm back like they had never left it, like the 18 months in the executive office on the 38th floor had been a dream, and this floured slab was the truth she had come back to. Elijah dragged a stool to the window and climbed up and pressed his face to the glass and watched the street wake up. He narrated everything: a garbage truck, a man with a red hat walking a small dog, a woman in a green coat carrying a coffee. Serena listened and shaped rolls and slid trays and set the timers and moved through the choreography of a life she had built with her own 2 Bordeaux-stained hands. At 6, the smell of butter and yeast filled the shop. At 6:30, she put the loaves in the front window, still warm, because Pearl's diary had said warm bread in the window pulls a street the way a candle pulls a moth. At 6:45, she slid the last tray of pastries into the case and stood back and looked at what she had done. Golden crust, deep brown edges, cinnamon and sugar, and something that smelled like her mother's Sunday kitchen. She wiped her hands on her avental and left 2 soft prints of flour on the Bordeaux skirt and did not care. At 7, she unlocked the front door. The first customer was a woman in a green coat. It was the same woman Elijah had narrated from the window. She stopped in the doorway and inhaled deeply and closed her eyes and said, "Oh my God." She bought 2 cinnamon rolls and a loaf and paid in cash and told Serena the shop had been closed for 4 years and she had missed it every single morning of those 4 years. Serena's hands shook when she took the money. She put the cash into the small wooden box under the counter because the register did not have a drawer yet, and the coins made a small hollow sound against the wood, and it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. The second customer was a man in overalls who worked at the hardware store on the corner. The third was a couple with a stroller. The fourth was an old man who did not buy anything, but who stood in the middle of the shop and cried without a sound, because Pearl had baked his wedding cake in 1974, and he had thought that memory was closed forever. By 7:30, the shop was full. Serena moved behind the counter, and her voice was steady, and her hands were quick, and Elijah stood on his stool and rang the small brass bell every time a new person came through the door, and every ring made someone laugh, and the laughter kept coming, and the coins kept coming, and the loaves kept going out the door in brown paper bags with her small hand-lettered logo pressed onto the side, and for 2 minutes, maybe 3, she believed she had done this alone. She let herself believe it. She let herself feel the weight of it in her chest. She looked across the counter at Elijah on his stool, with his hand on the bell, and his cheeks pink from the heat of the ovens, and she thought, I did this. My hands did this. My back did this. Nobody signed a check. Nobody opened a door. Me. That was the thought that was in her head when the room went quiet. It did not go quiet all at once. It went quiet the way water goes still when someone stops stirring. The couple by the case stopped talking. The man in overalls set his coffee down. The old woman near the window turned her head and did not turn it back. The bell on the door had rung again, and Serena had not looked up because she was counting change into a small palm, and by the time she had put the last coin down and lifted her eyes, the shop had already changed shape. He was standing just inside the door. Black suit, Italian cut, lighter than the one she remembered. White shirt, collar open at the first button, no tie. Silver watch, black shoes. His hair combed the way he had always combed it, short at the sides, a little longer on top. He had turned his head just slightly to look at the framed photograph of Pearl on the back wall, and when he turned his head, the collar of the shirt shifted and the tattoo showed. A wolf, drawn in fine black line, climbing the right side of his neck from the collar up behind the ear, a small snowflake at the base. She had not known the tattoo existed. She had known his shoulder blade. She had known the small scar under his jaw. She had not known this. She understood in 1 second that she had never really known him at all. Behind him, half in the doorway, stood a taller man in a plain black suit and black tie, cropped military hair, a vertical scar through the left eyebrow, eyes that did not move. She had never seen his face before. She recognized him anyway. Kang Min-jae did not say anything. He did not move toward her. He stood inside her door in a suit that cost more than 3 months of her rent, and he looked at her across the counter of her bakery, and she felt every drop of blood in her body decide, all at once, that it did not want to be in her face anymore. She held on to the edge of the counter with both hands. The wood was warm from the ovens. She fixed her eyes on the cash box and told herself, "Do not cry in front of this man. Do not let this man see one single thing. Not one." Then, a small voice cut the silence in half. "Uncle Min-jae." Elijah had jumped off the stool. He had jumped off the stool before Serena could turn her head. He had crossed the shop floor in 3 running steps, the small white sneakers slapping the tiles, arms already open, star on his shirt bouncing with each stride, and he had thrown himself against the black trousers of a man he had not seen in 5 weeks, and the man in the black trousers had already dropped to one knee to catch him. Min-jae caught the boy the way a man catches something he has been braced to catch for years, one arm around the small back, the other hand steady at the base of the skull, the boy's face pressed into the shoulder of the jacket, the boy's small fingers grabbing the lapel like he was afraid the man would leave again if he did not hold on tight enough. Min-jae closed his eyes for 1 second, only one. When he opened them again, he was already looking over the boy's shoulder at Serena, and the look in his eyes was not the look of a man in a boardroom. It was the look of a man who had been sitting in the dark for many nights in a row. Serena stood behind her counter and could not move. Her mouth was open. Her hand was still on the wooden name tag at her collar. The whole shop was watching her. "Teo Min-jae, look," Elijah said. He pulled back from the jacket and cupped the man's face in both small flowered hands and turned it, physically turned it, toward Serena. "Look, Mama did it. Mama has a bakery. Mama made bread and the bread is warm and there is a bell. Look." Min-jae looked. He did not blink. "Yes," he said. His voice was low. "I see. You want to ring the bell?" "After," Min-jae said. He did not take his eyes off Serena. "After I talk to your mama, okay?" Elijah nodded, satisfied, and hugged the man around the neck one more time, the way a child hugs a piece of furniture that has always been there, and then trotted back to his stool as if nothing about this scene were strange to him. Nothing about this scene was strange to him. Serena understood this at the same speed one understands a bone breaking. Elijah had never once questioned the man's absence. Elijah had never asked why Uncle Min-jae had stopped coming. Elijah had waited. A 5-year-old had waited 5 weeks and had not stopped waiting, because 5-year-olds do not know how to stop waiting for the people they love, and this man in the black Italian suit with a wolf on his neck, this man had known that. She felt the flour on her palms go cold. Min Jae rose from the crouch. He straightened the jacket with 2 fingers on the button. He crossed the shop slowly, taking his time, letting every customer see him choose the path, and he stopped on the customer side of her counter. He put both hands flat on the wood, palms down, the way a man puts down a weapon before a conversation. "Serena, get out." The word came out even. She had not known it would come out even. It surprised her. "I know. Get out of my shop." "I will," he said. "In a minute. If you tell me to leave in a minute, I will leave and I will not come back. But there is something you need to know first, and I would rather your customers not hear it." She looked past him at the door. Do-yoon had not moved. The room had not moved. Nobody was pretending to look at the pastries anymore. She looked back at Min Jae and hated him. She hated him with a clarity that had nothing to do with the executive office or the terrace of the 38th floor. She hated him for standing in her doorway on the one day that was supposed to belong to her alone. She hated him for what her son had just done in front of these strangers, for the way her son's small hands had gone straight to his face like he had rehearsed it. She hated him for the tattoo, for the fact that it existed, for the fact that she was learning about it from 3 feet away instead of from his own mouth in a bed she used to share. "Back room," she said. "Thank you. Do not thank me." She turned. She walked around the counter and past him without touching him, and past Do-yoon without looking at him. She kept her back straight. The Bordeaux skirt swung around her knees. She heard him fall in behind her at a distance a man keeps when he knows he is not welcome. Her hand was on the door of the small storage room before she remembered that Elijah was still on his stool at the counter, ringing the bell now for real, laughing. She stopped. She turned her head to the old woman by the window, the one who had watched her cry when she opened the door. "Ma'am." "Yes, honey. My son. Would you?" "I will sit with him. Take your time." Serena nodded. She could not manage a word of thanks. She stepped through the doorway of the storeroom, and Min Jae stepped in after her, and pulled the door mostly closed behind him, leaving it open a hand's width, because he knew, even now, that a closed door between them would break something he could not fix. The storeroom was narrow. Sacks of flour stacked along one wall, shelves of jars, a small window near the ceiling, letting in a gray square of morning. He stood on his side of the room. She stood on hers. 2 steps between them and 100 miles. She waited. She would not speak first. "You bought this place 3 days ago," he said finally. His voice was very quiet. "The paperwork went through on Friday. Cash. You emptied your accounts. None of that is The building's mortgage was called on Saturday." He said it flat, no inflection. The note holder had been contacted 2 days earlier by someone who was told to make the call at that exact hour. The point of calling that note was to force the sale of the ground under this shop before you could put down a floor. She did not understand. Then she began to understand. Then she wished she did not. The person who called that note, he said, did not know he was being watched. The person he answered to did not know he was being watched. "I have been watching both of them for 11 days. "Why?" He did not answer. "Why?" she said again. Louder. "Because a photograph landed on my desk 5 weeks ago at 2 in the afternoon." Her hand went to the doorframe. "A photograph of what?" "A photograph of you," he said. His voice did not rise. "Walking Elijah to school. Taken from a car parked half a block behind you. There were 4 photographs. The other 3 were of him, alone, on a swing, in the small park behind the school, getting into your car. The photographs were not from a paparazzi. They were from men who wanted me to know they knew where the 2 of you were." The storeroom went very still. That afternoon at 2:08, he said, I fired you in front of 40 people, and I told the guards to walk you out with your box, and I did not look at you once. That was 32 minutes after the photographs reached me. I did not have 33. She heard herself breathing. She did not remember starting. I have not slept a full night since, he said. That is not for your pity. That is a fact I am giving you, because you are owed it. On Saturday, when the note was called, I bought this building. Not in my name. Not in any name you would ever find. The deed sits in a box in a room you will never see. Do-yoon has been in a car on this street every night for 4 nights. He watched you paint that counter. He watched you carry a stool up your own stairs at 2 in the morning, with your son asleep on your shoulder. He watched a sedan drive by this shop twice at 4 a.m. on Sunday and turn around at the end of the street and come back, and he made a note of the plates, and those plates now belong to men who will not drive again. The bell rang out in the shop. Elijah's laugh cut through the wall. Min Jae's jaw moved once. Nothing that has happened to you in the last 5 weeks has been luck, he said. I am telling you this now because you deserve to know what your own life has been made of. I did not ask permission. I did not have time. I am not asking permission now. I am telling you the truth, because you are the one person I have ever met who does not need to be lied to. She stared at him. Her hand was still on the doorframe. Her wooden name tag was still against her collarbone. Somewhere behind her, in a room full of strangers, her son was ringing a small brass bell for a woman in a green coat, and every time the bell rang, the world she had built with her own Bordeaux-stained hands became a room she did not, in this moment, know how to walk back into. She opened her mouth. She closed it. Get out of my storeroom, she said. He nodded once. He turned toward the door. He put his hand on the frame at the height of her shoulder and did not touch her. I am not leaving the street, he said quietly. You can throw me out of this room. You can throw me out of this shop. You cannot throw me off Willow Street. I will sit in the car with Do-yoon until you tell me what happens next. If that takes an hour, it will take an hour. If it takes a week, it will take a week. He stepped out. Serena stood alone in the storeroom with 200 pounds of flour at her back and a gray square of mourning above her head, and she did not sit down, and she did not cry, and she did not scream. She lifted her hand off the doorframe. She looked at the flour on her fingers. She wiped it, slowly, on the bordeaux of her skirt, over the 2 soft prints that were already there, and she made a 3rd print, and then a 4th, and then she stopped, because her hand had begun to shake, and she would not walk back into her own shop with a shaking hand. She waited until the shaking stopped. It took a long time. When she stepped back through the storeroom door into the light and the smell of butter and the small brass bell of her own bakery, Min Jae was gone from inside the shop. Through the front window, she could see the black shape of a car at the curb, and inside it, 2 silhouettes, one leaning back against the seat with his eyes closed, one upright at the wheel, and neither of them moving, and neither of them looking away. Elijah turned on his stool and saw her and lit up. Mama, the lady says I can ring the bell for every single person all day. That's right, baby, she said. Her voice held. Every single person. All day. She walked back behind her counter. She put both hands flat on the warm wood the way a man puts down a weapon. She looked at the door. She looked at the car. She picked up a brown paper bag, and she began, very carefully, to fold the top of it into a neat, sharp crease. The crease was sharp enough to cut paper. Serena set the bag down. She picked up another one, and folded that one too. Behind her, the oven ticked as it cooled. In front of her, through the glass, the black sedan sat where it had sat for 3 nights running, and inside it, a man she had once loved was watching her decide what to do with him. She did not look up when the bell above the door rang. She heard the small shift of air, the slow closing of the door behind him, the soft weight of a shoe that cost more than her fridge landing on her clean pine floor. She kept folding. Serena. His voice was lower than she remembered. Or maybe she had trained herself to remember it lower, so that hearing it now would not undo her. The counter is closed, she said. The sign says open. For anyone else, it says open. Min-jae did not answer. He stood 2 steps inside the door and let her have the silence. Do-yoon stayed on the other side of the glass, back to the shop, hands folded in front of him like a man at a funeral. Serena finished the fold. She lined the bag up beside the others. She raised her eyes. He had aged, not in years, in something else. There was a hollow under his cheekbone that had not been there when she used to fix his collar in the empty conference room on the 42nd floor. The collar of his white shirt was open by 1 button, and where the fabric fell away from his neck, she could see the top curve of the wolf's shoulder, the fine black line of it climbing up under his jaw. He had never let her see the whole tattoo. He had promised her, once, in a hotel room in Jersey City, that if she ever asked, he would explain it. She had never asked. "There is a room in the back," she said. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. She turned and walked. She did not check to see if he followed. She heard him. The storage room smelled of yeast and cardboard, and the sharp, bright bite of the burgundy paint she had rolled onto the front wall 3 nights before. A single bulb burned overhead. Sacks of flour stacked against the wall. A metal shelf with jars of salt, cinnamon, and cardamom. In the corner, a folding chair. She did not sit. She did not offer him the chair. He closed the door behind him. He did not lock it. He stood with his back almost touching it, hands loose at his sides, the way a man stands when he wants a woman to know she can leave any second and he will not stop her. "Talk," Serena said. "Fast." Min-jae looked at the floor, then at her, then at the floor again. She had never seen him do that. In 2 years of stolen mornings and locked doors, she had never seen Kang Min-jae look for a place to put his eyes. "The Tuesday I fired you," he said. "The night before, Do-yoon brought me a folder. Photographs, your building, the daycare on 63rd, the bench by the fountain where you sit with Eli on Sundays. There were 3 men in those photographs. They were not mine." She did not move. She did not breathe out. She let him keep going. "They were counting. How long you took to walk from the corner to the door. Which window in the daycare Eli sat by. Which side of the bench you preferred. They were not planning to speak to you, Serena. They were planning to use you. Use me for what? To reach me." A something inside her chest closed and opened again, once, like a fist. She kept her face still. "You could have told me," she said. "You would have said run, and I would have said no, and we would have fought about it in a hotel room where 3 men already knew the door number." He took a small breath. "So, I made you a stranger to them. In one afternoon, in front of 80 people, I told the room you were replaceable. I told security to walk you to the elevator like a woman who never mattered. By 6 that evening, the photographs stopped. By 8, 2 of the 3 men were on a plane to Incheon. By midnight, the 3rd was in a room where he told me their names. You expect me to thank you?" "No, my love." The word landed between them like a plate dropped on tile. He did not repeat it. He did not soften it. He let it lie there. "Do not," she said. "Call me that in this room. All right? Keep talking." He nodded once. He went on. "The lease on this building was up in 11 days. Richard Abernathy could not have held it past the 15th. The holding company that owned the paper had a buyer with a signed offer to convert it into a phone repair storefront. I bought the paper at market on the Thursday, under a shell called Snowfield Holdings. I told the broker to refuse any other offer. You never saw the second offer, because there was no second offer. There was only me, keeping the room around you empty until you decided what to put in it." Serena felt her hand come up and press flat against the metal shelf. The cardamom jar rattled once and went still. "The 3 days you were painting," he said. Do-yoon was in the car from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. On the second night, a man walked past this window 3 times. Do-yoon got out of the car once. The man did not walk past again. On the third night, I sat in an office on 57th with a screen, and I watched you roll the second coat of burgundy at 2 in the morning. You had paint on your wrist. You wiped it on your jeans. You looked at the ceiling, and you laughed at something. I do not know what. I have watched it back. I still do not know. Stop. He stopped. Serena took her hand off the shelf. She walked past him to the small window above the sink. She could see the top of Do-yoon's head from here, and past him, the corner of Eli's stroller, where Margaret Hollis was crouched, tying the boy's shoe. Eli was laughing at something Margaret had said. He was inside a life that this man had been holding up with both hands from a room she had never been allowed into. You wrote my whole 3 months, she said, not turning around. No. You just told me you did. I kept the room empty. You wrote the 3 months. You bought the paper. You picked the paint. You hired no one. You told your mother no when she offered to lend you the down payment. You told your sister no when she asked to be a partner. You did every hour of this on your own. I did not touch a single decision inside these walls. You bought the walls. Yes, without asking. Yes. She turned. Her hands were shaking. She let them shake. She had spent 31 years learning that a woman can be shaking and still be exactly right. I am not, she said, a woman who is decided for, not by my father, not by my boss, not by the man I let into rooms I did not tell my mother about, not by you. I know. You do not know. You did it anyway. I did it anyway. The bulb overhead buzzed. Somewhere in the shop, a timer she had not set went off for 2 seconds and stopped. Outside, Eli's laugh spiked and fell. Here is what happens now, Serena said. Her voice was low, slow, the kind of slow that comes from a place where a woman has already decided and is only being kind enough to say the words out loud. You transfer the paper to my name, this week, at the price you paid. I will pay you back at the rate this shop can afford, which will be slow, and you will not accelerate it. You will not forgive it. You will not gift me $1. Every dollar you spent on this room comes back to your hand. Agreed. Do-yoon does not sit outside my shop at night. If you believe there is still danger, you tell me the danger. In words, to my face. I decide whether my child sleeps in this neighborhood. Agreed. Any decision that touches Eli passes through me first, not after, before. If you want to give him a bicycle, you ask me. If you want to teach him a word in Korean, you ask me. If you want to stand near him on a sidewalk, you ask me. He is not a bridge for you to walk across to reach me. Agreed. You will not appear in my life as a rescue. You will appear as a man who works, a man who waits, a man who is told no and does not rearrange the furniture because of it. If I want you in a room, I will open the door. If I do not, you will not stand at the window watching me through the glass. Agreed. You do not get to call me anything soft in front of my customers. Not in front of my son. Not in front of anyone who thinks I built this alone. Because I did build this alone. What you kept was the room. What I built was the life inside it. He was very still. His hands had not moved from his sides since he came in. She saw his jaw work once, twice. She saw him swallow. Agreed, he said. And then, quieter. All of it. Say it back to me. I transfer the paper this week. I take repayment at your pace. No forgiveness, no gift. Do-yoon comes off the street. If there is danger, I bring it to your face in words. Every decision that touches Eli passes through you first. I show up as a man, not a rescue. I do not stand at your window. I do not name you softly in front of your people. You built the life. I kept the room. Good. She walked past him and opened the door. The shop was fuller than she had left it. The line was out onto the sidewalk. Margaret Hollis was behind the counter with Serena's spare apron on, handing warm rolls to a woman with a stroller. Eli was on a stool at the end of the counter with a coloring page and a stub of red crayon. He did not look up when Serena came out of the back room. He looked up when Minjae came out 3 seconds after. Tio Minjae, look. He held up the page. 3 stick figures. 1 tall in a suit, 1 with a swirl of hair, 1 small in the middle, hand held on either side. That is us going to the park. Minjae crossed to the counter. He did not touch the boy. He crouched so his eyes were level with the paper. May I look at it closely? He asked. Yes. Thank you. Serena watched him ask her son for permission to look at a piece of paper her son had drawn. She felt something she did not have a name for. She did not try to name it. The bell above the door rang. Margaret Hollis turned her head, and her face did something quiet. Serena looked past her. Pearl Whitfield was in the doorway, 78 years old, white hair in a soft, loose coil at the back of her head, a burgundy floral dress that matched the wall behind the register, the way a mother matches a daughter, without either of them planning it. A cane of dark wood, reading glasses on a fine chain around her neck. She stood in the doorway with both hands folded on the top of her cane, and she looked around the room the way a woman looks at a house she used to live in. Girl, Pearl said, you painted my wall the same color. I did not know it was your color, ma'am. I know you did not know. That is how I know it was meant. Pearl crossed the shop slowly. The line parted for her without being asked. She stopped at the counter. She lifted one thin hand and laid it on Serena's forearm, warm and dry. 3 times, Pearl said, men in nice suits came to buy this room out from under me. 2 of them thought I would sell for money. 1 of them thought I would sell for fear. None of them read the deed careful enough to see whose name was on the corner. My grandmother's, my mother's, mine, now yours. Ma'am, I do not know if I can. This bakery, Pearl said, quiet, chose you. Do not argue with a room that chose you. Serena's eyes stung once. She did not let it go further. Pearl squeezed her arm and let go. She looked past Serena at Minjae, still crouched by Eli's stool. She looked at him a long time. Young man, she said. Ma'am, you are the one who kept the paper. He hesitated, then, yes, ma'am. Then you can carry flour. My back is done for the day, and there are 6 sacks in the alley that need to come in. He rose. He did not look at Serena for permission. He looked at Eli. Little man, he said, may I go and carry the flour for your mother's shop? Yes, Eli said, gravely, without looking up from his crayon. But do not spill. I will not spill. He walked past Serena. In the doorway he stopped. He turned back to her. He rolled the cuffs of the white shirt back once, twice, up to his elbows. The wolf's shoulder disappeared inside the collar again, as he lowered his chin. He said nothing. He walked out the front, around to the alley, and she watched through the side window as he bent, took a 50-pound sack of bread flour onto his shoulder, and carried it in through the back door of the shop she owned. By 4 in the afternoon, 6 of Serena's former colleagues had come through the door. Margaret Hollis had walked out of the holding at 9:10 that morning. 3 others had followed her by lunch. The last 2 came in still holding the cardboard boxes from their desks. They ate cardamom rolls at the small tables by the window, and they did not say much. They did not have to. The story of the woman who had been fired in front of 80 people had traveled through the building in less than an hour, and the story of the bakery she had opened had traveled just behind it, and the 2 stories together had done in one morning what a union drive could not have done in a year. Pearl stayed until 3:30. Then she kissed Serena on the cheek, kissed the top of Eli's head, and let Margaret walk her to a cab. Minjae carried in the last of the flour. He did not sit. He stood at the far end of the counter with a coffee he had paid for, and drank it standing, watching the room the way a man watches a room he is not sure he is allowed to want. At 7, Serena flipped the sign to closed. Margaret took Eli home to Serena's mother's apartment for the night. The boy had a school day in the morning and a mother who needed a room to think in. The last neighbors left. Do-yoon, without being told, walked to the corner and got into a cab and did not come back. Serena stood alone behind the counter. Min-jae stood alone in front of it. The overhead lights were down to the 2 dim bulbs above the register. She poured 2 coffees. She set one on the counter in front of him. She kept the other in her hand. She did not sit. Neither did he. They drank in silence, eye to eye. The front door was not locked. She had left it open by half an inch, and the cold night air came in around their ankles like a small, honest animal, and neither of them moved to close it. He set his empty cup down. He did not reach across the counter. He did not ask when he could come back. He waited. "Good night, Min-jae," Serena said. "Good night, Min-jae." He walked to the door. He put his hand on the frame. He looked back once. She was already turning off the light above the register. He would have to earn every step, and he knew it. And that was the first true thing between them. She locked the door behind him. She turned. She looked at the burgundy wall Pearl Whitfield's grandmother had painted the first time. She pressed her palm to the warm pine of the counter. The room she had chosen her back. She turned off the last light. 4 hours later, she was already on her feet. The alarm had not rung. Serena had been awake long before it could. She stood in the kitchen of the bakery with the ovens humming behind her, the timers set, the trays lined, and her hands moving through motions her body had learned in 3 days and 3 nights. Flour on the marble, Bordeaux cloth on her shoulder, the small chalkboard by the register turned to face the door, the word "open" written in her handwriting with a slow, careful curl at the end. She had rewritten it twice. The 3rd time it looked right. Elijah was still asleep upstairs in the little room she had made into a bed for him. She had carried him up at 10 the night before, kissed the crown of his head, told him tomorrow would be the biggest day of both their lives. He had mumbled something about a lion and turned into the pillow. She had stood at the door watching him breathe for longer than she should have. Then she had come down and worked through the night on the pastries that could not be made in advance. The Bordeaux dress hung on the back of the kitchen door. She had ironed it at 3 in the morning. She had not planned to iron a dress at 3 in the morning. She had planned to sleep. Sleep had not been interested. At 5, she went upstairs and washed. The mirror above the sink was still spotted where the last owner had taped a family photo for 30 years. She wiped the spots with her thumb and looked at herself. 31, her mother's eyes, her grandmother's mouth. She lifted her chin the way her grandmother had taught her when she was 7 and had come home crying from school. Chin up, baby. Chin up even when nobody's watching. She put the Bordeaux dress on. It fit her the way she remembered clothes fitting before she had spent a year in blouses buttoned to the neck. The fabric caught at her waist and fell to her knee in a slow line. She slid her feet into the low Bordeaux shoe. She fastened the small gold earring in each ear. She tied the cream apron on top and pulled the strings tight at the small of her back. Her hair she left down. The curls fell heavy around her shoulders, still damp at the ends, one long strand escaping over her cheek. She pinned nothing. She looked at the wooden name tag on the counter. Serena. She had carved the letters herself with a pocket knife 2 nights before, sitting on the floor by the oven with wood shavings on her jeans. She slid the pin through the fabric of the apron and clipped it above her heart. At 6, she made coffee for herself and drank it standing by the window that faced the street. The block was still asleep. The street lamp on the corner flickered twice and steadied. Across the road, the sedan that had been there every night for 3 nights was not there. She noticed. She did not know what to do with the noticing. She set the empty cup in the sink and turned away. At 6:30, she woke Elijah. He came down the stairs in the navy shirt with the little embroidered star, jeans dark, sneakers white, curls still damp from the sink. He stopped 3 steps from the bottom and stared at her. "Mama." Yes, baby. You look pretty. She smiled without meaning to. The smile caught her off guard, and she had to breathe through it. She lifted him off the last step and held him for a second longer than a hug required. He smelled like the soap she had used since he was born. She set him down. Sit at the little table, she said. I made you the star bread. He climbed onto the stool by the window. The bread was shaped like a small 5-point star with sugar on the top. She had made 3 of them at 4 in the morning because she had not been sure which shape would come out cleanest. He picked the middle one. She had known he would. At 7, she pulled the last tray from the oven. The croissants had risen the way Pearl's notebook had said they would if she folded the dough the extra time. The bread rolls sat in a neat row on the wooden board. The lemon tarts glowed pale yellow under the lamp. She arranged everything in the glass case, one item at a time. She stepped back. She looked at the case the way a stranger might look at it walking past. It looked like a bakery. It looked like her bakery. At 7:45, she unlocked the front door. She did not open it. She only unlocked it. She wanted the sound of the bolt sliding back to be a private moment. Nobody was on the street yet. The sound was small and dry. She left her hand on the wood for a second, and then she stepped back behind the counter. At 8, the first person came in. It was the woman from the corner, the one with the scarf and the small dog. She had walked past the window every morning for 3 days, pretending not to look inside. She came in now with the dog under her arm and her eyes on the glass case. She said good morning in a voice that was trying not to be curious. Serena said good morning back and offered her a croissant. The woman took it, tore it in half, ate one piece standing at the counter, and closed her eyes. Oh, she said. That was all she said. She paid. She left with the other half in a paper bag. Serena watched her go. She watched the woman stop on the sidewalk, take a bite of the second half, and shake her head slowly, the way people shake their heads when something has surprised them into remembering. The bell above the door had not stopped ringing since. By 8:15, there were 6 people inside. By 8:30, there were 9. The man who ran the shoe repair across the street came in with his son and bought 4 rolls without asking the price. The 2 teachers from the school on the next block came in wearing coats and left with boxes for the staff room. An old man with a cane came in and stood at the counter for a long time before he said he used to buy bread from Pearl. Serena told him he could sit at the table by the window. He sat. He did not order. He watched her work with his cane between his knees and his hands folded on the handle. Elijah had stationed himself by the little chalkboard. He had appointed himself in charge of it. Every time somebody new walked in, he pointed at the open sign and said welcome, the way Serena had taught him the night before. He said it seriously each time. He was 5 years old and he was working. She caught his eye once and he winked at her without smiling. He had been practicing that wink for a week. At 8:45, the doorbell rang, and a woman she had not seen in a year walked in. Margaret Hollis, coat still on, purse still on her shoulder. Serena felt her hands go still on the tray. Margaret walked past the case without looking at it. She walked up to the counter. She looked at Serena for a long moment, and then she said, quietly, I brought my sister. I wanted her to see. Behind Margaret, a woman with the same jawline stood by the door holding a coffee from another shop. She raised the coffee in a small salute. Margaret leaned across the counter and said, in a voice only Serena could hear, I gave notice last night. I was going to wait until Monday. I didn't want to wait anymore. Serena did not answer. She wrapped a roll. She slid it across the counter. Margaret took it in both hands like it was warm, the way she remembered warm being. At 9, the bell was ringing without pause. There were 14 people inside. The line was starting to fold along the window. Elijah had abandoned the chalkboard and climbed onto the stool by the register to hand small paper bags to whoever asked. Serena moved. She poured coffee. She wrapped bread. She counted change. She thanked people by name when she knew them, and by the item they had ordered when she did not. The corner of her mouth ached from smiling. She let it ache. For 2 minutes she believed she had done this alone. It was not vanity. It was a small, clear space that opened inside her chest, the way a shutter opens on a room that has been closed for a year. She saw the shape of what she had built. She saw the flower on the marble and the star bread her son had chosen, and the woman from the corner walking away shaking her head. She saw the 12 months of blouses buttoned to the neck, and the 3 days of paint on her hands, and the night on the floor by the oven, with a pocket knife in her fist. She saw all of it in a single held breath, and she thought, quietly, in a voice that sounded like her grandmother's, "Chin up, baby, chin up. You did it." Then the bell above the door rang once more and the room went quiet. She did not look up right away. She was pouring coffee for a woman with a stroller. The stream of coffee filled the paper cup and she watched it fill, because she had learned in 3 days that the small, precise motion of pouring was the thing that steadied her hand. She heard the sound go out of the room. She heard Elijah stop moving on his stool. She heard the murmur near the door die into nothing, and the nothing was the sound she had been hearing in her sleep for a year. She set the pot down. She lifted her eyes. He was standing in the doorway. Kang Min-jae, the snow wolf. Black suit, white shirt, collar open at the throat, no tie. The tattoo showed at the side of his neck where the collar fell away, the black line of the wolf running up under his jaw, the small snowflake at the base of it visible in the morning light. His hands were at his sides. He was not moving. He was looking at her, and only at her, and the look was the same look he had given her across a boardroom on a Tuesday morning a year ago, and it was also entirely a different look, because there was no boardroom between them now, and no chair between them, and no distance for the look to travel, except the length of a bakery floor. Behind him, 1 step back, stood Park Do-yoon, iron hand, the scar on his eyebrow, the earpiece, the suit and the tie, the same shade of black as the sedan she had stopped looking for that morning. He did not enter. He stood at the frame and held it with his shoulder the way a doorstop holds a door. The room did not move. The woman with the stroller had turned her head. The old man at the window had lifted his cane an inch off the floor without meaning to. Margaret Hollis had gone still in the middle of the room, with a roll wrapped in paper in her hand. The teacher on the corner had lowered her coffee. Serena counted them all in a single breath without meaning to count, and then she stopped counting, because the counting was her mind trying to run. She did not run. She placed her hands flat on the counter. She felt the marble under her palms, cool, real, hers. She lifted her chin the exact width of a fingernail. Min-jae's mouth opened. A word was on it. A word she recognized from the shape of his lips before it left him. Her name. He did not get to say it. Because Elijah moved first. Elijah, who had been sitting on the stool by the register with a small paper bag in his hand. Elijah, who had been about to hand the bag to the woman with the stroller, when the bell rang and the room went quiet. Elijah, whose head was the first head in the entire room to turn all the way toward the door, because he was 5 years old, and 5-year-olds do not know that a room going quiet is a warning. He looked up. He saw the man in the doorway. His face changed. It did not change slowly. It changed the way a light changes when a switch is thrown. The seriousness he had been carrying since 8 o'clock fell off him. The wink he had practiced fell off him. The little bag in his hand fell off him and onto the counter without him noticing. His whole small body went bright. Teo Min-jae. The words came out of him at the top of his voice. The room heard the words before Serena did. She saw the word uncle land in the air between her son and the man in the doorway, and she saw the word connect them across the length of the bakery, like a rope thrown across a river. She saw Min-jae's face do something she had never seen it do. She had seen him cold. She had seen him calculating. She had seen him hungry. She had never seen him break. He broke. His shoulders dropped an inch. His mouth softened. His hand, which had been at his side, opened at the palm. Elijah was already off the stool. He went in a run. He went the way small boys go when they have been waiting for someone without knowing they were waiting. He crossed the length of the bakery in 6 steps, and he did not stop, and Serena reached out with her hand to catch the back of his shirt, and her fingers closed on air because he was already past her. He threw himself into Min-jae's arms. Min-jae caught him. He caught him the way you catch something that you have been imagining catching for a long time. He caught him at the ribs and lifted him, and Elijah's arms went around his neck, and Elijah's face pressed into the collar of the white shirt on the side where the wolf tattoo climbed, and Min-jae closed his eyes. He closed his eyes. That was the thing that broke Serena. Not the running, not the word uncle, not the reach of her hand into empty air. The closed eyes of the snow wolf pressing his mouth into the top of her son's head like he had been holding his breath for a year and had just been allowed to breathe. Serena stood behind her counter. Her hands were still flat on the marble. Her chin was still lifted the exact width of a fingernail. Her breath moved in her chest in small, controlled measures, the way her breath had moved in the elevator a year ago on the way down from the 22nd floor. She did not move. She did not speak. She did not blink. She looked at her son in the arms of the man who had fired her in a room full of people 12 months ago, and had not said her name in 12 months, and had a tattoo of a wolf on his neck, and a sedan on her street every night for 3 nights, and eyes closed now around a 5-year-old boy who had called him uncle in front of 14 strangers. Behind Min-jae, Park Do-yoon shifted his weight one time and settled again. The old man at the window lowered his cane back to the floor without making a sound. Margaret Hollis put the roll down on the nearest table. The woman with the stroller took a slow step backward. Nobody spoke. Elijah, in Min-jae's arms, lifted his face from the collar and smiled at Serena over Min-jae's shoulder. The smile was proud. The smile said, "Mama, look who came." The smile did not know a single thing. Serena's hand moved. It moved the way a hand moves when it does not consult the person it belongs to. Her fingers curled slowly on the marble. Her palm pressed flat, and her knuckles rose. She looked down at her own hand, as if it belonged to a stranger. Then she lifted it off the counter and she pressed it against the front of the cream apron over her heart, over the small wooden tag that read Serena in the letters she had carved with a pocket knife. She pressed her hand there and she held it. Min-jae opened his eyes. He looked at her over the top of her son's head. The look was not the boardroom look. The look was not the elevator look. The look was the look of a man who had been standing in a doorway in his own life for a year, without permission to come in, and who had just been carried across the threshold in the arms of a child who was not his. His mouth opened again. Her name, again, on the shape of his lips. She lifted her chin one more fingernail's width. She did not let him say it. She turned her head toward the little table by the window, toward the old man with the cane, who was watching her the way people watch someone crossing a bridge in high wind. She spoke, and her voice came out even, low, unhurried, the voice she used when she wanted a room to remember she owned the floor she was standing on. "Sir," she said, "would you like your coffee now?" The old man blinked. Then slowly he nodded. His hand tightened on the cane. She reached for the pot. She did not look at Min-jae. She did not look at her son. She poured the coffee. The stream filled the cup with the same small, precise motion she had been using since 8 o'clock. Her hand did not shake. The coffee reached the line she wanted it to reach. She set the pot down. She slid the cup across the counter to the old man. He took it with both hands. She lifted her eyes. Min-jae was still standing in the doorway, with her son in his arms. She looked at him, fully, for the first time in a year. She looked at the tattoo at his neck, and the white shirt at his collar, and the closed eyes of Park Do-yoon behind him, and the entire length of the bakery floor between them. She spoke to him at last, 2 words, in a voice that reached the back of the room without her raising it. Put him down. Min-jae lowered Elijah to the floor, with the care of a man setting down something breakable. He did not look away from Serena while he did it. Elijah, unaware of the storm above his head, kept both small hands wrapped around one of Min-jae's fingers. He tugged. "Tio, I made you cookies, the star ones. Later, buddy." Min-jae's voice stayed soft. His eyes did not. Margaret Hollis stepped forward from the crowd without being asked. She crouched to Elijah's height and held out a hand. "Eli, sweetheart, come help me pick which cupcake for your mama. She's been on her feet all morning." Elijah looked at his mother. Serena gave a small nod. He went, because he was 5, and because Margaret smelled like the perfume Auntie Margaret always wore in the office. He half remembered visiting once. The door of the bakery closed behind them, with a soft chime that was suddenly too loud. Serena did not move from behind the counter. She had one hand flat on the marble. The other still held the bakery apron string she had been tightening when she turned around and saw him standing there. The Bordeaux fabric of her dress caught the morning light through the front window. She was aware, with a clarity that surprised her, that she was not shaking. "Storeroom," she said. It was not an invitation, it was a location. Min-jae inclined his head. Do-yoon shifted, one hand ghosting toward the inside of his jacket. Serena's eyes cut to him. "You, outside, on the sidewalk, where I can see you through the window." Do-yoon's face did not change. He looked at Min-jae. Min-jae did not look at him. "Do what she said." Do-yoon left without a sound. Serena walked around the counter. The neighbors in the shop parted for her without being asked, the way people part for someone carrying something hot. She did not look at any of them. She walked to the storeroom door at the back of the shop, past the racks of cooling loaves, and she pushed it open with her palm and held it. She did not hold it for him. She held it because she wanted the choice of when to close it. He walked in past her. The storeroom smelled of flour and old wood and the faint metal of the mixer she had wheeled in 3 nights ago at 2 in the morning. There was one bare bulb, sacks of flour stacked against the far wall, a small window high up, painted shut. The framed photograph of Pearl Whitfield still sat on the shelf where Serena had left it, angled toward the door as if the old woman had wanted to see who walked in. Serena let the door swing closed behind her. She did not lock it. She stood with her back against it. She wanted a wall behind her. She wanted the option of the room. "Talk," she said. Min-jae did not sit. There was nowhere to sit. He unbuttoned the front of his jacket with 2 fingers, slowly, the way a man empties his hands before a conversation he already knows will hurt. The Bordeaux stain of her lipstick from the morning was not on him. Nothing of her was on him. He looked, for 1 second only, at the photograph of Pearl, then back at her. "The day before I fired you," he said, "Do-yoon brought me photographs." She waited. Sokolov's people had taken them, long lens, from a car. There were 15. Elijah walking to the crosswalk with the after-school woman. Elijah on the bench outside the library. You, picking him up? The angle was from across the street, and low, from a windshield. Somebody had been sitting there for at least an hour to get that frame. Serena's fingers tightened on the door behind her back. She let them. "There were 3 of you," she said. "In those photos. There were 3 of you. And a 4th photograph, of the door to your building, with the buzzer numbers zoomed in enough to read." The bakery outside had gone quiet, in the way rooms do when people are pretending not to listen. Serena did not care. Let them listen. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because if I told you, you would have stayed. That was my decision." "I know." He said it plain. He did not soften it. He did not ask to be forgiven for it in the same breath. He let the sentence sit. "I took it from you," he said. I know I took it from you. There is no argument in this room where I win that one. She had not expected him to give her that so quickly. She had come into this room ready to fight for that sentence, and he had handed it to her before she had to lift her hand. It disarmed her more than she wanted to admit. She kept her back against the door. Keep going. I sat with Do-yoon that night. He told me not to do it that way. He said there were 4 other ways. I said none of them got you out of the building without it looking like a favor. He said, they will hurt her. I said, better she hates me while she's alive than loves me while she's cold. Nice line, Kang. His mouth moved, once. Not a smile. Almost. If I fired you cold, in front of the floor, Sokolov's people believed you were nothing to me. They stopped watching you. They stopped watching him. He nodded once, toward the shop. Sokolov does not spend a man on the child of a woman thrown out of the building, only on assets. You made me an ex-employee to unmake me as an asset. Yes. You made my son safer by making me poorer. Yes. You did that without asking me. Yes. He was not arguing. He was answering. The neatness of the yeses made her want to hit something. She did not. Keep going. I'm not done with you. I told Do-yoon to pull 2 men off the West Warehouse and put them on your block, one on the corner of your street, one in a car outside the after-school. He did that the same night. I told him if the men were seen, they had to look like they belonged to somebody else. He put them in white delivery clothes. You saw one of them, 3 weeks ago, leaning on a mailbox, and you crossed to the other side. I remember. He was ours. She closed her eyes. She opened them. Keep going. I did not sleep that first week. Sokolov made a move on the port on Thursday. I broke his shipment. $8 million in a night. He blamed one of his own captains. His attention turned inward, but I did not stop watching. You watched everything? Everything I could. The interviews. Yes. The bank. Cranston at Sterling. Min-jae exhaled through his nose. Do-yoon watched from the coffee shop across the street. After you left, he walked in and told Cranston with a smile to go home and think very hard about what kind of woman he had just refused. Cranston called his manager. His manager owes me a favor from a wedding 6 years ago. I told him to leave you alone, that you would find your own money, that nobody in that bank was allowed to touch you. You didn't give me the loan. No. You could have. You would have known it was me. So you let me get told no. I let you get told no by Cranston. I did not let anyone actively work against you. That is the line I held. Serena took her hand off the door behind her back. She walked past him. She walked to the shelf. She picked up Pearl Whitfield's photograph. She looked at it. The old woman looked back at her with that mild, level gaze that said she had heard everything, and had heard worse, and had lived to keep a shop open. The building, Serena said, without turning. Richard's building, the one that was almost condemned. I bought the debt. When? The night after I fired you. She turned around. The photograph was still in her hand. You bought the debt the night after. Under a shell in the Caymans, registered under a paper name that was born and died in a Busan hospital in 1980. Richard sold the shop to you clean, but the note on the walls, the one that could have foreclosed in 90 days, is in a filing cabinet in the Caymans, and it will never move. You bought my walls. I bought the paper against your walls. There is a difference. Not to me. I know. Serena set the photograph down. She set it down slowly. She did not slam it. She was aware of the way she was choosing every movement now. She was aware that her hands were choosing not to shake. The 3 days, she said. The renovation. Do-yoon in the car. Every night, when you walked into the diner 3 doors down at 11, and the owner said the grilled cheese was on the house, I had called him at 7. The woman with the paint on her hands eats free. and does not know why. You watched me paint. The camera on the streetlight across from your door is not a city camera. I put it there. I could not see inside the shop. I could see when you sat on the curb at 5 and drank water from a bottle and pushed your hair back with the back of your wrist. That is the closest I let myself come to your face for 3 days. She looked at him. He was standing with his hands at his sides. The tattoo of the snow wolf climbed the side of his neck out of the collar of his shirt, where the top button was undone. She had not seen the tattoo since the last time he had bent his head over her shoulder in his office, 3 months and a lifetime ago. She had thought, then, that it was for her. She had thought a lot of things. You did all of it without me knowing. Yes. You wrote 3 months of my life. I did not write it, you wrote it. I stood behind you with my hands ready to catch a piece of the ceiling if it fell. It did not fall. That was you. Don't do that. Don't do what? Don't hand me back my life like it's a gift you're being generous about. It is not a gift. Then what is it, Kang? It is a debt. I owed you the truth today. I am paying it today. And if Elijah hadn't run at you, if he hadn't jumped in your arms in front of 40 neighbors and Margaret Hollis and every reporter on the block, would you be paying it today? He held her eyes. He did not look away. He did not soften. No. The word landed in the room like a plate on stone. No, he said again, quieter. I had not planned to come today. I was going to watch the opening from the office feed. Do-yoon told me at 6 this morning that Sokolov had been eliminated by his own people on Sunday night. Do-yoon told me the block was safe now, that the watch could come off, that I could stand down. I told him I wanted to see the opening from a distance. He drove me here. I said I would wait in the car. When I saw the neighbors starting to come in, and I saw the light on your face through the window when the first cupcake sold, I got out. I did not think about it. I got out. And Eli saw me before I saw him. He remembers you. He remembers me from the office. He called me Tio, because you called me Tio in Korean once, by accident when you were tired, and he picked it up, 94 days. He remembers me. Serena's hand went to her mouth. She held it there for one full breath. She lowered it. 94 days, she said. Yes. You counted. Yes. She turned away from him. She walked 2 steps. She stopped. She turned back. Do you know what I told him, she said, when you fired me? Do you know what I told my son when I got home that night and I could not lie to him because he could see I had been crying in the elevator? I told him that some men are not who you think they are. I told him that some men look strong and are actually small. I told him that Teo Ming-jae was not our friend after all, and that we were not going back to the office, and that we were going to be all right without him. And he cried. Kang. My son cried in the bathtub that night because a man he trusted had disappeared, and I had to tell him it was because that man was not worth trusting. Do you understand what you asked me to teach my son so that he could stay alive? Yes. Say it. I asked you to teach him that I was small, so that he would not miss me enough to look for me, so that if anyone asked, he would say the truth from his own mouth, that Tio was gone and Tio was nothing. Sokolov's people talk to children in playgrounds. I know this because I have done it. A child who misses a man out loud is a map. I asked you to erase the map. You asked me to bury you in my child's mouth. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. The bare bulb overhead flickered once and steadied. You should have told me, she said. You should have knocked on my door that night, and you should have sat on my couch, and you should have looked at me, and you should have said, Serena, 3 men are watching your son. Help me hide him. And I would have. I would have hidden him. I would have hidden us both. I would have walked away from the job and the city and the sky if you had told me. You did not tell me because you did not trust me to be smart. You did not trust me to be steady. You looked at a black woman raising a son alone and you thought, she will panic, she will run wrong, she will get herself killed. So you decided for me. Say I'm wrong. You are not wrong. Say the rest of it. I did not trust you to be steady. I trusted myself more. I was wrong. Watching you paint the walls of this shop for 3 days without sleep taught me I was wrong. Watching you carry a shelf across the sidewalk at 4 in the morning with your child asleep on a blanket in the corner taught me I was wrong. Watching Cranston tell you no, and watching you leave the bank without your shoulders coming down 1 inch taught me I was wrong. I could have knocked on your door that night. I did not, because I was afraid you would look at me the way you are looking at me now, and I would not be able to bear it, and I would say something to keep you close, and then you and Eli would be dead in a week. So I chose a version where you got to hate me and stay breathing. Today, when Sokolov went cold, was the first day I could stand in a room with you and let you have the choice. I am giving you the choice. The choice of what? Everything. The paper on the walls of this shop, which I will tear up in this room right now if you tell me to. The 2 men on your block, which I will pull tonight. My name in your son's mouth, deleted forever, if you tell me to. If you tell me to leave New York tonight, I leave. Do-Yoon has a plane at Teterboro. Seoul before Eli's bedtime. He paused. He did not look away. I am not asking you to forgive me. Forgiveness is not the transaction. The transaction is, what do you want, and I will do it. That is the debt I owe you. That is the debt I am here to pay. Serena walked past him again. She walked back to the door. She put her hand on the knob. She did not open it. She stood there for a long time. Outside the door, the bakery had begun to move again. She could hear the small clink of a cup, the murmur of a woman's laugh, cut short, embarrassed. Margaret's low voice, keeping the room afloat. And under it all, Elijah, telling somebody with great seriousness that the star cookies were the ones with the sugar on top, and those were for Tio, because Tio liked stars. Serena closed her eyes. Get out of my storeroom, she said. He moved to obey. Not out of the shop. He stopped. Out of this room. Go stand behind the counter. Roll up your sleeves. Do you see those 2 sacks of flour by the wall? They need to go to the front. There is a woman in a wheelchair by the door who wants a loaf of the sourdough, and I do not have time to lift a sack right now. You are going to lift the sack. You are going to bring the loaf to the woman. You are not going to speak to my son unless he speaks first. And when my son does speak to you, you are going to answer him like a man who intends to be answerable for every single word he says to my child for the rest of his life. Are we clear? We are clear. Then go. He went. He crossed the storeroom in 3 strides. He passed her without touching her. He opened the door. The light from the shop poured over him for 1 second, gold on the shoulder of his jacket. He stepped through. The door swung shut. Serena stood alone in the storeroom with the bare bulb and the smell of flour and the photograph of Pearl Whitfield watching her from the shelf. She put one hand against the wooden shelf. She let her weight tilt into it. She let herself, for exactly 1 breath, close her eyes and be tired. Then she opened them. She walked to the shelf. She picked up Pearl's photograph. She turned it around once in her hands. She set it back down, facing the door, the way Pearl had wanted it. Not yet, she said, quietly, to the old woman in the frame. But maybe. She smoothed the front of her Bordeaux dress. She tightened the apron string at her waist. She reached up and pushed a curl back from her temple with the back of her wrist. And she walked out to her shop, where a Korean man in a white shirt with his sleeves already rolled to his elbows was bending, in silence, to lift a 50-pound sack of flour that he had bought 3 months ago without her permission and was now carrying, at last, in front of her. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been pushed out of a room, my loves, by someone who was actually trying to keep you alive? Have you ever mistaken a man's silence for abandonment when it was really him standing guard in the dark. Mark my words, sometimes the ones watching over us never ask for the credit. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, protection, and legacy, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.